as an individual, if you really ask me, I would applaud revolutions. But as a thinker, I'm beginning to be like, okay, maybe revolutions are not the way, because look at many revolutions. What happened after that revolution?
What if you turn hardship into greatness, anger into serenity? Everything changes. Make your life a masterpiece. Dr. Januarius Asongu has published over 2 dozen books and over 100 scholarly articles, most of which can be found on his blog. And now he is here to really talk about his newly published book, The Splendor of Truth, by Wipf and Stock in February 2026. An outstanding, award-winning book who really is incredibly important for this day and age, because it deals with how we actually know. Have you ever wondered how you know? Why it is important that we know how we know, what we know, and what we actually do, and how we actually make meaning of what we know. This and so much more now. Dr. Januarius Asongu, such a honor to have you to discuss your award-winning book, The Splendor of Truth. What a title! And first and foremost, please introduce yourself in one powerful sentence.
Yeah, I'm Januarius Asongu, and I see myself as a multidisciplinary scholar, given the various fields that I dabble into. Let me use that word. Yeah. So I see myself as a multidisciplinary person, but beyond everything, I think all what I do uh, is centered on this whole concept of truth. That is the defining element about who I see myself to be. And I've been seeking that truth, uh, whether theologically or philosophically, psychologically, legally, and all those type of things. So those are the various dimensions that I see myself. And I, even though I'm originally from Africa, uh, I do not want to box myself into any region, because I think my ideas are universal. And I think true ideas should not be limited to regions. So I do uh, resist people who want to classify me as African philosopher or that. And yeah, I simply see my ideas as universal.
What do you think is it that made you curious and wondering about the truth? Because it can be very demanding, and people might quickly just say that there is no such thing as truth.
Yeah, I think right from the very early age, right from the time I began thinking, I think to some level, I may not have put it philosophically, but in some shape or form, my mind has always been been attracted to this whole concept of truth. And I, first of all, wanted to, so I've been attracted to this concept of truth. And so for a very long time, I've really thought about this, and that is why I ended up writing this book. In fact, The Splendor of Truth, in my view, is a book that I had to write. I had no choice but to write it because it defines who I am and what shapes me completely. And I believe it's is going to be valuable to anybody who reads it, no matter your perspective. Because here I am not necessarily prescribing what is truth. I think I really see it more as a methodology, as a way of arriving at the truth. So, in that sense, whatever you consider to be true, I'm proposing a methodology that you could use in clarifying your thoughts, your thinking, and maybe help you arrive at a better understanding of the concept of truth. And I would say that truth, as you know, or in my opinion, uh, not just opinion, I think that is like a classical way agreed upon way of defining truth. So, truth is basically when there is conformity, there is there's an alignment between the intellect and reality. When there's an alignment between the intellect and reality, that is truth.
That's very powerful. And I have to say that I read quite a few books, and you are an incredible writer. I
Thank
mean,
you.
just the clarity that you have in reading this book really impressed me. And I can't really recall any other book who was written with such clarity. And being able to write a book in such a clarity, given the fact that there were so many difficult concept, very sophisticated concept, and you put it in a way that actually the common man can actually understand it. I think that's huge. And I always tell everyone that when you look at the greatest people, whether in sports or in writing or whatever, it always looks so easy. And
Yeah,
that's precisely why they are the greatest, right? Michael Jordan, for example. It looks so easy when you watch him, right? But once you try doing it, it gets really, really tough. So, what do you think is it that enabled you, whether it is from your childhood or from now, enabled you to write in such a clarity, what enabled you that? How come?
yeah. What is that? I think I have natural talents as a writer. I think I'm a better writer than than a speaker. I don't think I communicate my ideas verbally as nice or as well as I do when I'm actually writing. So as a writer, I think I have that ability to. I mean, because when you're thinking, when talking, you just talk. Uh, Sometimes you don't have enough time to think before you talk. But when you are writing, you have that liberty to to think, even write a sentence, come back a day after, and ask yourself, like, is this the best way I could have expressed this and all that? So that really helps me to be. The writing format really helps me to communicate at my best. And but I also think again I keep on talking about childhood. Even as a child, as a student, my teachers, others, anybody who ever read something written by me, that always struck like, oh wow, that is well done. I even feel like in school there were times that. Uh, they would give me a topic to write, and maybe I did not necessarily understand it so well, but I'll write it so well that I'll end up with high grades. And this teacher is like praising me, and something in me will be like, I don't think he knows he just got caught up by the way I express myself. It's not, yeah. But that said, though, I think there is something about this book that really excites me. That really excites me. You see, I also think, as you rightly said, that great ideas need to be communicated in very simple, easy way for people to understand. So, one of the thoughts, I didn't present it in this book as such, but it explains what I'm trying to do. But one of the things that I've come to think about as I talked about this book is that if you look at it, uh, the concept of original sin, I've come to think that the original sin was not that somebody, if an Adam ate an apple or whatever fruit it was, but that the original sin was an epistemic sin. It was an epistemic fracture. The original sin was that a man, our first parents, our ancestors, had a misconception of knowledge. It was an error on their part. So for me, knowledge is fundamental to everything and even goes deeper than biblical stories of sin. To me, even accepting it literally is still a consequence of their lack of knowledge or their error in thinking. so, so for me, truth is really, really, special. However, I do distinguish between truth and knowledge. Maybe we'll get into that. I do, as far as truth is concerned, I do agree that truth is independent of us. And that truth exists and is independent of us. It doesn't depend on me or you or any other person. As I remember one of my first philosophy books, there was this example where they said if a tree fell in the forest and nobody ever knew that such a tree existed, or let alone that it has fallen. Did that tree ever exist? And of course, it existed. It is so. So reality does not depend on us. Truth does not depend on us. However, uh, the difference between truth and knowledge, as I began by explaining, is that uh, truth is the alignment of the intellect with reality. And so, truth is out there. We may not have knowledge of it. But what is important now is how do we know that truth? And that is what I am struggling to explain here, like how like what is knowledge and how do we gain knowledge of truth. And I think we cannot have complete knowledge of truth. And even if we do, we may probably not be aware that we have it, especially from the philosophical perspective. Maybe theologically, that could be, but from the philosophically, you still not be able to I mean, you probably not be able to justify, to prove without reasonable doubt that this is the that this is the truth. However, for knowledge, it is like so there's that distinction between knowledge and truth. Truth being independent of us, and knowledge being our ability to understand that truth.
Now, walk us through a little bit, as you did in the first chapter, really, how we came to understand the world from ontology to really epistemology, because it took some time over the past three millennia, I would say. So, walk us a little bit through what's the difference between ontology and epistemology, and why it is so important that today we actually ask the question of how do we actually know?
Yeah. So ontology basically deals with being. Uh, uh, I think it's the scholastics would talk as would refer to it as uh, being as being. Yep. So it's independent of us, while epistemology, and I always try to epistemology it just means knowledge. So um, so they are all aspects of metaphysics. So one is dealing with knowledge in itself, knowledge as knowledge, while epistemology has to do with uh sorry uh one ontology has to do with being reality, while epistemology has to do with knowledge. And the question is, how do we come to understand the world or to understand reality? And there have been different ways of which we come to understand reality, starting from the pre-Socratic times, which I mentioned here. But if you go to chapter 1, you see I go back to the pre-Socratic days when they were trying to grapple between myth and making meaning of the world. That was the preoccupation of that age. And I would say, unfortunately, many people, even up to today, thousands of years after, are still grappling with that, asking the question, what is reality? What is being, and all of that. So after that period, I mean, they did come out with quite a number of things. There were great philosophers like Socrates and Aristotle and Plato, all coming out with very interesting ideas about reality, about being. And then for a period of time, these ideas grew and they were embraced with the coming of Christianity. Some of these ideas were embraced by Christian scholars, Augustine, Aquinas. But even before that, even the Islamic scholars too. There were a number of Islamic scholars who embraced, especially Aristotle, and uh, uh, they 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 explain the world and reality and even religion, faith and reason, using those tools of philosophy that they had gotten from the early Greek philosophers. And then came the scholastics in the Middle Ages, with the greatest of them all being Thomas Aquinas. And I think in my opinion, I think Thomas Aquinas remains one of the greatest philosophers of all times. Not only, I mean, first, he was one of the people who clearly distinguished philosophy from theology, uh, but also he developed also a methodology, like in his his summas, basically, he developed a methodology. And even though I would argue, and I've argued in the book, that uh, his theology, his teachings, some of the things that he said may be arguable and questionable, but his, for me, his greatest strength uh, lay in his in his methodology, the ability to criticize and to give us or to be critical. I don't want to use the word criticize, but like to be critical and give us a template on how to reason well and to arrive at the truth. In fact, I think that was his greatest contribution. And even during the age of the Enlightenment, I think it was Kant or Descartes, I may be wrong, one of those actually said that they used the very instruments that that Aquinas had developed in order to help dismantle uh, uh, like the scholastic thinking, because basically the scholastics were church people, they were churchmen, and a lot of their thinking was uh, was premised on religion. Even after Aquinas distinguished between philosophy and theology, but lots of the thinking was premised on revelation, and they tried not to contradict religion, and so they put themselves in a box. However, by presenting a methodology, the enlightened the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment basically took those very tools to help to dismantle what they had built. But for me, though, as I said, my philosophy is very much from the ontological perspective, it still remains very much Thomist. I think I basically agree with that, where I find a little bit of, not just little, yeah, I would say a little bit of difference is with the epistemology. It's with the epistemology because Aquinas actually believes to a greater extent, there may be some nuances here, but to a greater extent, believe that you can know the truth, like with certainty, which is what I'm a little doubtful.
Why do you think it is particularly important today that we seek the truth and lay a little bit the groundwork, what you found, what happened, the past 200 years? And also given now the advancement of science and technology that goes so fast that to some extent we are overflown, as you mentioned in the book, by appearances and really starved of understanding. So unpack this, what you mean by that, and how you develop really why it is so important that we actually know how we know, and that we have a grasp of epistemology and really potentially finding the truth with those kind of instruments that you lay out in the book.
Yeah, I think I'll go as far back as to the age of so-called enlightenment, which yeah, I use the word so-called. I mean, in a sense, I think it was an important revolution in philosophy and in science, very, very important, where the thinkers of those days felt that science should not be controlled by revelation, and they liberated it from revelation. But beyond that, I also think that every age, especially when you are rebelling against something, there is always the tendency to exaggerate your own point. to exaggerate your own point. And I think that is what happened with the Age of Enlightenment, where instead of pointing some of the weaknesses of the medieval age, the scholastic philosophy, instead of just pointing some of the excesses and correcting it, they tried to completely dismantle and disregard it, which I thought they went too far. So first came the rationalists, who said that everything is would believe in the certainty of thought and believe that everything must be purely rational. And then related to that, you had the scientists who said everything had to be proven like scientifically or it does not exist, which of course everything is not provable in that. For example, I believe in science, but I don't believe in scientism, like not, which I think goes too far. Then we had the empiricists who were talking more about experience. To tell the truth, I would actually prefer the rationalists to the empiricists who were talking about experience. And I think they were the guys who opened the floodgates to what we have today, like just talking about experience and your experience, my experience. There is no judge objective way of judging that experience and all that. And I think that went into the field, even though I'm not a sociologist, but I think that also went into the field of sociology and really did affect people a lot, and the way they came to think. And moving to the modern era, and even what today people call post-modernism, where postmodernism simply almost rejects objective truth or objective reality, and they think that everything is subjective, which to me is crazy. And it's only these people, this philosophical school, that believes like that, and they only believe that when it comes to coming up with societal or things. But when it comes to, like, let's turn to science itself, there is no postmodernism in science. Not, there cannot be 2-3 ways of doing the same thing and all that. So I think for me, the postmodernist school is really what, or thought, is really what has destroyed uh, philosophy, or almost destroyed philosophy, and almost destroyed or brought us to where we are today, where in fact in popular media you hear the word post-truth society, and I'm asking, like, what do you mean by post-truth? So we have gone beyond truth to what? To truer or what? But no, they're not talking about a better truth or more. They're simply saying truth does not matter, or that truth is so relative that it makes no meaning, or depends on every individual. I think that is extremely dangerous. There should be a unifying thing. There is still objectivity and all that. The only thing that I would say is, which in that sense I was heavily influenced by Karl Popper. The only thing I would say is that uh, that our knowledge of truth, that truth exists, as I started our conversation, truth exists independent of us. But our knowledge of that truth is conditioned by, uh, uh, I don't want to call experiences, but it's conditioned by various perspectives, various ways in which we see things. So maybe a psychologist could approach truth from a psychological perspective. A scientist could approach truth from a scientific perspective. Even in theology, a Muslim could approach truth from the perspective of the Quran. And in Christianity, you could approach truth, if you're a Catholic like myself, maybe from a particular Catholic bent and all that. But still, there is those are different ways of looking at it. And that is why, for me, I developed, like, this book, The Splendor of Truth. At the end of the day, I came up with an idea, a new philosophical framework, which I call critical synthetic realism. And critical synthetic realism is saying that it may sound eclectic, but it's not eclectic because it's synthesis. So I'm saying that in order to get at the truth, the more perspectives you look at it, maybe theologically, maybe philosophically, psychologically, scientifically, if you look at things from as many dimensions as possible, that helps you to come to a greater to a better understanding of truth rather than just looking at it from your own one uh, uh, perspective. And that's why even you look at my writings, especially some that I've not even published. When I look at, like you mentioned, that I was an award-winning this thing. Yeah, I just presented earlier today. I presented at a conference, at a conference in Chicago. I did that remotely, though, virtually. And in my presentation, I was looking at different, looking at uh, things from different perspectives, from the perspective of Christians, Hindus, Muslims, African traditional religion. So I try to look at things from various perspectives because I think the way when you look at things from that, the closer you would come to knowing the truth, or like to appreciating what may be true, as opposed to looking at things from one narrow perspective.
And it's also very important what you're mentioning in terms of Popper, right? Because there are basically three worlds of Popper, right? There is, as you mentioned, reality that's outside. Then there is the reality within, how we experience our own self, and then ultimately the third world is really what we make of the two worlds, right? And
Yes.
so that's a creative act. So why do you think, and why do you think Popper was so important? Because you also the last time you mentioned about how you actually came to learn about Popper.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, Popper is very important. I mean, Popper's epistemology, I disagree with certain things that he says, but today let's focus on what I agree with him, and it's mainly his epistemology and how he looks at truth. And he talks about fallibility, and about, so basically I think that all human knowledge is fallible. That there's what that means is that it's just a humility to knowledge. I'm saying that we humans should be humble enough to realize that that we may not have the full answer. So our knowledge is fallible, and so we should be open to criticizing the knowledge and to self correction. Remember last time I talked about the fact that I was committed to self correction. And it must, when I talk about self correction, I don't mean that I should be the one to correct myself, but like I listen to other people. And when they say things, I mean, ultimately, I correct myself because I will be the one to decide that, okay, this view that I had previously is not, it doesn't seem to make sense. So in that sense, it's self-correction. But what provides the ingredients for that self-correction is being open to criticism, to other suggestions, to other points of views, and all that. So I think for me, Popper became very important in that, again, he is really against dogmatism, like in saying that this is the truth and we know it and it's fixed, and he's rather saying that knowledge grows. In fact, he's against historicism and all that. So he thinks that knowledge grows, and that knowledge grows even uh, by knowledge growing and different fields advancing. We are learning everything. The history of knowledge continues to grow, and it continues to influence the things that we do, and continues to enlighten us. At the end of this, it's a journey towards enlightenment, continues to enlighten us so that we keep on having a better grasp of reality. For example, I tell people this. My dad actually taught me, not informally, formally in school. My dad was a geography teacher before he became a principal, and later he even taught in college and became a college president. My dad, but as I was taught geography by my dad. He's a geographer. I was taught geography by my dad, and he taught us um, about the planets. But like what he taught me about the planet was correct then because it was based on the knowledge, the planetary world as known during those days in the 80s when he taught me. That's what was correct. I remember I've had this discussion with him. Today, there's a lot of advancement in planetary science, and some of the things that he taught, in fact, one of the planets is no longer considered a planet, and there have been new planets, and there's whole new definition of what becomes a planet. It doesn't mean that what he taught me was a lie. Actually, that is the wrong word to use. It was just that, or that it wasn't true. As I said, truth is independent of us. The planets are independent of us. What we know about the planets is us, is our knowledge of it. And so that knowledge keeps on growing. And if you have that humility, then you're open to self-correction, or you're open to, let me just call it correction, whether it's self or not, you're open to correction. And I think that's the humility that Popper brought to me. The intellectual humility to say that that you could be wrong. And to always open up to that possibility, and to try to correct the errors that you make.
You mentioned that the mind structures all our knowledge. So how do we develop a critical mind towards finding the truth, or at least getting closer to it?
Yeah, in this book, I've developed something that I call the synthetic loop. If that might, let me see if I can. Should have looked at gone there. Yeah, well, so I've developed something that I call the synthetic loop, and that synthetic loop is simply steps that I believe can be followed. As I mentioned earlier, that I think for me the strength of this work is not so much on the ideas itself, but on the methodology. I think I'm proposing a methodology, an approach to knowledge and all that. So I come out with the concept of what I call the synthetic loop. There I begin by saying that you I identify 4 stages of that synthetic loop. You begin with a hypothesis where you make a prediction, then you move forward to testing it. It may be sounding like science, but it doesn't have to be science. Maybe it could even be the test could be like actually practicing it, doing something, put an effort to realize what you think, your hypothesis, see whether it works. And so you get into action. So that is the testing. Another word is action or effort. And then you do what I call the data synthesis. Basically, you critique. Now that you've put this into action, you critique it and say, how does it really work? Or how is it working in reality? You compare what you have. You compare your results to what you thought before, to your hypothesis. And if it is correct, then, if it works, then probably you are into something. But if not, then you were in error. And therefore you have to correct yourself. And sometimes you are able to correct yourself, sometimes you are not. But at least you recognize the fact that there is something wrong. with my thinking here, even though I don't have the answer. Even though I don't have the answer, but I can figure out that there is something wrong. And it may mean going back. And the synthetic loop is a continuous loop, maybe going back, tweaking certain things and trying to improve it and all the like. In our conversation last time, I think I stated something which I mean, I didn't really explain it that much, but maybe I would use that example to clarify even what I mean by this synthetic loop. You remember I told you that that growing up, I believed that the phrase that the truth will set you free. Yeah, so I believe that the truth will set you free, and I was really, I mean, like to me, it was like a guiding uh, principle. And I just believed that, and I tried to be like a moral guy. So I would be like, if I knew that this thing was right, I would say it. I don't mind the consequences. I don't mind whether it hurt the other person or not. My only thing was, it was true. So I have to advance it. Of course, that was naivety. But as a kid, as a teenager, it was like that. But later in life, as I became more mature, I started asking myself, like, would the truth really set you free? First of all, I got myself into trouble. I got myself into trouble, even with the Cameroon government. I'm originally from Cameroon, because I criticized the government and I said things were wrong, and I tried to expose things. Even as a teenager, as a student leader, I was investigated, I think at the age of 14, 15. The only thing that saved me was that they did not believe that somebody as young as myself could come out with those ideas. So they were, but they were my ideas. Nobody indoctrinated me. Unfortunately, they shifted the focus to my dad. They thought that it was my dad who must have taught that. And just to take the story, what later saved him was because one of the investigators was his classmate. And later, when he realized it, he was like, okay, let him go, and the thing died off. But that was it. That's why, as I say, I don't mince word when I said sometimes the truth gets you into trouble. Like, yeah. So, however, let me put this into context. I don't really think it is the truth, though. It's our version of that truth, or what we think we know about it, that that may lead you into trouble. In fact, this whole book is about the liberative power of truth when you read it to the end. But what I had intended it to be provocative, and I still do believe that the truth in itself, as I said, the truth is independent of us. It's our knowledge of that truth. And sometimes we could be mistaken in that knowledge and think that we know everything, or that we know all the perspective, but we may not. And that leads us into problems. But not only that, even if we're completely right and all those type of things, like in the case of a mathematical truth or a legal matter where you could literally logically show that you are right and that you are on the right side, you could still get into trouble. And that is why, as I grew up, I later again come to Popper. Popper is against revolution. He thinks that revolutions do not work. He says you cannot change the world in one, I think he used the phrase of one big swap or something like that. Rather, he proposes piecemeal social engineering. He proposes piecemeal social engineering. Yeah, so I've come to that. Also is one aspect of his that actually disagreed, because as a young man, I was really tempted to be a revolutionary. That was what appealed to me, like especially growing up in a dictatorship like Cameroon. I felt like the truth gave you no middle ground. It was either good or bad. and I stood for the good, and so and so the other guys were wrong, and we have to do everything to uh, to even a revolution to change. But you see that even sometimes when there are revolutions, the guys who do the revolution become the new oppressors. They become the new oppressors because now they bring their ideas and they want to put it on other people. Or maybe they were not even that ethical and they come in and it was just that they didn't like the people who were robbing the country. They thought they had no opportunity and all their struggle is to put themselves there. So rather, that's one thing I've been forced to learn, part of the self-correction. As an individual, if you really ask me, I would applaud revolutions. But as a thinker, I'm beginning to be like, okay, maybe revolutions are not the way, because look at many revolutions. What happened after that revolution? So I've been humble enough to be like, Papa had his had the right thing, that we should change things gradually, because it is that process that may end up really being revolutionary and bringing about change. Even look at the way postmodernists have taken over the world. They never had a postmodernist revolution that came and said, oh, this we're bringing down. Yeah, maybe they had other things, but basically by spreading their ideas gradually and influencing people, saying that, oh, this and that, they basically are in control of today's world. And those of us who disagree with them, that think there's objective truth, that uh, 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 we need to borrow that methodology to gradually try to influence society by using different tools, social media, using conferences, the old-fashioned conferences, like me going to talk in at different conferences. Spread your ideas gradually so that many more people can buy into it, become convinced of it, and then you see that it would be a more effective revolution than a revolution that takes place in one day, where one class think that they can replace the other class. At the end, it looks like history is telling us that that doesn't really end up well. It doesn't seem to solve everything.
It's so true. Real change only really comes with incremental
Correct.
changes. And that's ultimately what really lasts. And I'm fully with you. You also mentioned, and I think that's precisely what you're just saying, is that liberation really begins in the mind.
Yes.
How have you find liberation in your mind?
Yeah. Again, as I said, that Grador was the guy who wanted to be like, I think I've always been, I think I mentioned it last time. I didn't grow in a situation of poverty, like personal poverty. No, I was lucky enough to come out from a rather well-to-do, not a millionaire family, but like middle class or upper middle class. So we had enough. And so what shocked me was the poverty in my neighborhood, like in the rest of the town. When I went to school, met friends who could not have all their meals, who could not afford the things that I took for granted. Some moral thing in me told me that that was not right. And so I started trying to be like, how can we help the people and all that? So often, even as a kid, and I was one of those kids who would stand up for somebody who was being bullied, and I would take it personally. So there was always something in me that wanted to liberate others. I always felt that I was lucky. That's what I thought about myself, that I didn't need much. But then I wanted my friends to have like what I felt that I had. So I'd always seen that. So when I later went to the seminary and I got in contact with liberation theology, that just spoke to me. Like, I was like, oh, I finally have meaning or words to what was intrinsically me. And so I embraced it. And for me, though, uh, uh, like in my other book, we will be talking about it, Beyond Doctrine. So I've taken this whole idea of liberation theology, I've expanded it a little more. I'm not only looking at it from a political perspective, so it's in line with my synthetic approach. So I'm looking at it from different other perspectives. But again, I'm so much into this idea of knowledge that I think that the biggest problem that we face is epistemic. And so for me, liberation should start with epistemic liberation. And what I mean by epistemic liberation is liberation from ignorance, liberation from fear. And a lot of time, fear is based on ignorance. Liberation from domination. So those are, so that is what I see. So I'm still, actually, I agree with a lots of the things about liberation theology, or what I can also call liberation philosophy, but I try to extend it, and I go further. Just like I told you that the original sin in my way of thinking was an epistemic sin. The same thing we have to liberate. We have to liberate people from ignorance, from error, So you have to liberate people from error. I think I remember. I think I went little off without clearly explaining what I meant the last time when I was saying. So, like, if you take again my idea of truth setting us free. So, to me, I started it like a hypothesis. Even though at that time that's not what I was doing, but I simply accepted it. But I now see that it was a hypothesis. I went into tested it with my own life, had people. In fact, I have my friends as we speak who are in jail in Cameroon because they stood against the Cameroon government. And one of my friends, his name is Blaise Berignui. Blaise, he's up to today. He's in jail. He's put life imprisonment, but every time I talk to him, he seems to be a happy guy, and he tells me that truth will set him free. I feel sorry for him. I mean, not that he says that, but I feel sorry that he's in jail. And or that he's a guy, he's a lawyer. He's a lawyer, a constitutional scholar in Cameroon, and because he was so much against what is happening to the English-speaking people of Cameroon, he stood for that, and they arrested him, tried him for terrorism, even though he was not one, and they put him for life in jail. But he believes like that. So when I look at it, so when I test it in the ordinary way, I'm like, no, Blaise is in life imprisonment, and probably if I never left Cameroon, I would probably be with him in jail. So it did not set me free, at least in the ordinary sense of it. So that's what I mean by you start with the hypothesis, you test it. So now when you test it, you come to the synthesis, the critique, which sometimes forces you to go back and be like, was this thing really wrong? And so my thinking about it is not necessarily that it was wrong, it's the way you look at it. For example, there's that difference between, as I've tried to point out today, between truth and knowledge. So was it the truth, or was it our knowledge of it that brings you into problems and all those type of things? And so you critique it, and maybe it was the approach, because they actually arrested them because they were trying to lead a revolution. So was it? It's not that the underlying thing was right, but could the approach to it brought them into problems and all that? So you start looking at things from a very critical perspective. So it's not really like black and white. Like there are lots of nuances. So you start looking at it, and it is that multidimensional perspective to things, and at the end of the day, you look at it and now you start correcting it. So again, as I said last time, I wasn't implying that that people should not believe in the truth. I was just it was being provocative, but that is one of the areas where I've looked. And so today, when I speak, I'm a little bit more nuanced in my approach to that perspective and to other things. But for me, liberate, as I said, at the end of the day, I think liberating ourselves from ignorance is the most important thing you can have. You can do for yourself, and helping the rest of the world to be a little more enlightened. To be a little more enlightened really helps. For example, today I'm deeply Catholic and I'm proud of it, even though I disagree with certain things in the church, but I'm still proud of that tradition and all that. But I have many friends of different faith traditions. And why we agree is that usually when I engage them to talk about topics that would otherwise be religious topics, I talk about them from a perspective of philosophy, from a perspective of knowledge. And I come to it so we can all agree on maybe fairness, on maybe justice, and all those type of things. So that is the way I approach truth. And yep.
Brilliant. Dr. Januarius Asongu, I can't wait to have you back as soon as possible and really continue this incredible journey about your incredible books that you have published. And I have the privilege and the joy to really dissect and read your newly published book by Wipf and Stock. Yeah. And we will actually yes. We will actually put the link below so really everyone can get a copy as soon as possible. Yeah. Wipf and Stock.
Yeah, let me just add one last thing before we go. Is that I may not have highlighted that, but I think even reading the very first chapter of the book, you get to that for me, truth has a moral dimension. So truth is not just some isolated thing. It has a moral dimension. And so truth becomes something that you are obligated to live up to. And ignorance is not just lack of knowledge. To me, it also has moral consequences. To me, there are moral consequences of ignorance, and even other dimensions. For example, think about something as simple. Let's say there is a drought, and you are superstitious, and you think that the drought is because the gods are angry. What do? Maybe you simply pray. I'm not undermining prayer, but maybe you pray or just stay and say, I don't know what happens. But if you are scientifically minded, you are going for the truth. You go and look and you investigate, why are there droughts? Is it, are the areas where there's no drought, are there better people than us, where we are suffering drought, or are we worse than they? And you look at it and you could find out rationally that no, it doesn't, we may have our own faults, but the other people to have their own faults. So no, so probably drought is not an act of God. And so you now start asking yourself, how do we address that? So you see that knowledge has consequences. Even just the ideas itself, because the guy who says that it was God or some malevolent spirit or supernatural spirit escapes agency, takes no responsibility for it. While the person who embraces it and says there's something wrong takes agency for it, like decides to do something to fix it. And that is why I call the book a critical philosophy of knowledge and global agency. The important thing about the agency, about our ability to effect change, I think is very important.
So important. It's
Yeah.
crucial because there are no excuses.
Yeah.
It's on us and not on some gods out there. Really, really important.
And it's not an anti-God book.
No.
Yes, it's not.
And I think that's what you're also elaborating actually, and comes true, is that at the very end, at the very foundation, that probably has to be a mind, and that is one God.
Yeah.
Dr. Januarius Asongu, what a blessing. Thank you so much for being truly a blessing for myself and really for the world and to everyone who is listening, really. This book is available through the publisher Wipf and Stock and was published in February 2026, and we will put down the link so you can get a copy.
Even on Amazon, it's on Amazon and all the other book vendors. Yeah, public.
Dr. Januarius Asongu. That's why knowledge matters. Make your life a masterpiece. Visit now programs.d-ykm.com.